Yes, and thank you, Larry. Um, that was great, and not just because you cited me several times. Um, so I'm thinking that, we have a lot of time for questions, and we want to be a little bit democratic in giving everyone a chance to ask questions. So I think if some of us have microphone access and some don't. So I think, to be fair, maybe everyone should just type their questions if they have them as text, and the presenters can read them and address them in the order received, or to the extent that they can get to all of them. So with that, you can start typing your questions now, and I have plenty of my own if others are slow to type. But take a minute. Oh, one from Walter already. Okay, great. Thanks.
So yes, the Project Smiles, we are doing a randomized controlled style. In fact, we already did the randomized controlled experiment in the 2016 JSE paper, because our point was it doesn't do us any good if songs are great, but they can only be pulled off by people with some kind of crazy creative talent or something. We wanted something that would transcend that. And so the way we did it was we had we used a learning management system where students were all exposed to some content mini readings, but half of the students were randomized to have like a song or a cartoon inserted into the otherwise self-contained reading, so that half the students got the extra thing like a song and half didn't. And what we found was that the students who had been exposed to the songs did statistically and practically significantly better on the midterm embedded items related to those songs. So yes, randomized controlled experiments are a wonderful way to get more definitive answers on these things. But I think the rich description you get from how things work in a qualitative study is also really important too. So we really need both, more of both, to get a more complete picture of what we have.
So it looks like somebody's asked me about lyric analysis activities. I actually left that up to each teacher to decide what that looked like. I just said you have to engage your kids. So what I saw was making posters. I saw comparing textbook lyrics to song lyrics. I saw interpretive dance coming out of kids making creating a dance to go with the lyrics. Any way in which the kids engage, and so that they're having to engage with the concepts in the lyrics. And the lyric analysis are a lot of the sense-making activities. I like Walter's question. At the college level, I can't speak to, but I did see some interesting things with middle schoolers, and I've observed some interesting things along those lines when I went to teach high school. What I found was that if you can get somebody engaged in a song that is perceived as a leader in the class, then the rest of the kids follow suit. They'll also get engaged. If you have somebody who's perceived as a leader who rejects the idea of using songs, other kids follow along, which is kind of interesting. I noticed that especially in my high school classes, when I introduced some of the same songs, the kids would you know, if you had somebody who'd get up and get into it, then the kids would, in that class, particular class, would beg to have songs. And if you went to the next class where somebody who was perceived as a leader rejected the concept of using songs, then nobody would participate. At the college level, with my future teachers that I'm teaching, my pre-service teachers, they seem to enjoy it, but that's a different bag of worms.
I would add, this is Larry, I would add that like the first time I do something like that, like this semester, I said I'm trying the students write the songs for the first time. I'm doing it as an extra credit activity so that, you know, there's no pressure if they don't want to do it. But of course, for extra credit, I think everyone's going to do it. Another option is to offer some alternatives. So you could say you could write a song or write a poem or make an educational video. And that way they've got, you know, they can find the thing that's in their comfort zone. Another thing is you can let them do it in groups of 2 or 3 so that those that are less, you know, are more shy, you know, can do something on the behind the scenes side of the project. So there's lots of ways to make it more comfortable.
In my classes, I didn't have a lot of resistance to the songs. I had resistance to the dancing. At first, I noticed that some would just kind of sit. I didn't make anybody do it, but eventually, as the quarter progressed, I noticed that everybody was kind of starting to get up and move. So there wasn't a lot of resistance, and I think they probably preferred doing the songs than it didn't feel so much like you're doing statistics work. It didn't feel as much work as, you know, fun doing something collaborative because they work in groups. So I think they enjoyed working together, creating something that didn't seem to be all numbers.
When I've had students write songs in the past to address the questions about writing, I've given kids options. One of the things that I kept in my classroom was a karaoke machine and with karaoke discs. And I would take the lyrics, original lyrics, and I would print them out and kind of keep them in a notebook so that they could match the meter and the syllabication of the song. I've also have kids who just simply want to write their own. There's a whole lot of kids who are musically motivated, and they would write their own compositions, their own music even, and bring in an instrument to perform. You do have to give them some guidelines, and I think that the guidelines just presented earlier are some really good ones.
You know, just like a ski mountain always has a part of the mountain that's just right for where you're comfortable. I think the same thing is with the writing the songs, because you can start off with just having to fill in just a word here or a word there, and then work up to having it, you know, doing a line that completes a rhyme, and then, you know, a verse and so on. And so again, some of the templates, like in the Crowther article from this year, I think are good things to offer students to scaffold the process.
There's a question about the biggest surprise. I think one of the things that was kind of a nice surprise was I teach in this particular class, it's students from who are not necessarily statisticians. So they're from other majors, and they're taking this as a requirement for their quantitative reasoning. And it gives them a chance to kind of showcase their strengths. So, you know, so I have some students who are in the music department, or some students who are, you know, in the English department, and they want to kind of show off their skills at writing. So I think it giving people an opportunity to shine, because they already feel like they don't know anything about statistics. They feel very anxious about it. They feel like, I don't know if I'll do well. So when you give them something that taps into their area of strength, it reduces some of that anxiety a little bit.
That's an interesting question. You know, if it was just vocabulary, there are other ways to do it. I felt like songs were good for conceptual, building concepts as well as vocabulary. There are just so many things that one song can accomplish. And again, a lot of it is what it is that you do with the song. If all you do is pull out vocabulary words and talk about how they're used in context, then you're building vocabulary. If you get into using metaphors and analogies that are built into songs and looking for what they can help tell us about the content, now you're getting into a richer content experience. So it would depend on the song, I think, and it would also depend on how it's used and how teachers integrate it into an instructional unit.
Yeah, it's the way I read your question, Greg, is you know, like for example, in statistics, you know, we have this very convoluted way of saying things like, you know, we failed to reject the null hypothesis, but it's kind of hard to make that singable. I mean, you know, you failed to reject the null hypothesis at the 0.05 level of significance. I mean, well, actually that almost works, but but in general, I agree that the discourse would be harder to pull off in the song than just vocabulary itself. As far as Rick's question, I mean, as you saw, we in our Smiles project, we really did not consider any concept off limits for turning into songs. And I have to admit, like, you know, sometimes Greg or Monty would say, "Hey, is it okay if I write a song about this?" And my first reaction was, "Really? Can you really make that into a song?" Like I wasn't sure it could be done, but they did. So now I'm a firm believer that there's really no concept that can't potentially be pulled off.
To answer the question about conceptual songs, Professor Boggs' Cell Castle is all about the concepts. It is an analogy on parts of the cells and what they do, and really getting and building an understanding of what are the actions that are happening through that song. Really is a conceptual builder, not so much vocabulary.
Okay, so that pretty much brings us to the close of our very first session. Thanks so much to Donna, Nyaradzo, and Larry for getting us off to a great start. Thanks to all the attendees for their interesting questions.